If you're curious about how to find a particularly good house to break into on Oralank, in the region of Scifi, it's quite straightforward. It's actually surprisingly easy, and even an average civilian like you may be able to guess, because even when you're a human targeting another species like the native Norgilians, burgling a house still just comes down to finding a good target that's empty and unsurveilled. In other words, when the owners are on vacation and relying on fallible technology to keep everything they own safe. The key is not to aim too high or too low. Too high, the targets start to have live-in help. The tech gets harder to crack, and some neighborhoods even have rent-a-cops patrolling. Too low, the payout isn't worth it, but also, most of the valuables are locked in wall safes while they're gone. The key is to find someone who makes enough money that they wouldn't think twice about leaving trinkets in the closet jewelry box. That could pay for my life for a month. The target had been found by Fronic, the Zauk I worked with. I'd known him for about 5 years now. He had decent hacking skills, and since the well-off folks in this city like to take vacations a few times a year, all he needed was email confirmations. Flights, cars, hotels, even dinner reservations. Everything was booked on Galnet, so he had their entire schedule down to the minute. That, plus the layout of the house from architectural plans and real estate websites, let us plan out the entire job. Then reading emails between them and family and friends allowed us insight into anyone who might stop by to pick up the mail or a maid service that would make sure they came home to a clean house. Though to cut down on those chances, we always hit them quickly. On the second night they were gone. The reptilian, Hiraleia, I'd known for 2 years or so, and I had just worked with her a few months earlier. She was smart but careful, a good combination. Break-ins like these were right up her alley. She said the first time we'd met, she told me her cousin had gotten overconfident on the jobs he'd worked. On one, he and his people got out clean just under the wire, but instead of that making him more cautious, he took it as proof of his skills and became bolder. He was in jail inside a month. After running through the plan one more time, we drove out into the part of the city where acreage was just as important as how many bathrooms you had. Much like Earth and the colony planets where some people still managed to get too rich for their own good, wasting land was a sign of wealth. Their go-to black hole for water consumption was something between moss and algae. Our truck was as plain as can be, labelled as an emergency plumbing company. Even the rich get clogged pipes, and I can barely picture their type using a plunger, but we still always hacked the garage door to store it inside. Once the door closed behind us, I pulled my balaclava down over my face, and my 2 partners did the same with their species-specific coverings. Hiraleia had been driving, and she came around to the back of the truck as we opened the doors. "Here you go," Fronic said, handing over the bags. We each wordlessly took them, and he left the car doors open as we walked up to the house entrance. Norgilians averaged a foot taller than humans, as opposed to most species, who are only a few inches shorter or taller, so wandering through their homes was always a bit of a trip. Fronic hooked up his gadgets and did his thing with the security system. I knew the basics, but he was the pro, and we walked in with the door giving a single 2-tone beep. Our process was professional and efficient. We always started with the master bedroom. People always keep the things most valuable to them closest to hand, and these folks had a walk-in closet, like most. Any jewelry, watches, tech gadgets that could be resold, even emergency cash, it would be in there. I once found 1,000 credits rolled up in the back of a bedside table drawer. Then, it happened. At the top of the stairs heading down the hall, a door opened, and someone walked out into the hallway. We halted immediately, and she came to a stumbling stop, a beat passing from shock on both our parts. Muscle memory laid out exactly how the next 3 minutes would go, an exit plan we always had, in case one of 100 went sideways. But that only took a split second. Promptly after that, I took in everything else. Standing 20 feet down the hall was a human girl. She wore pajamas, looked like she had just woken for a glass of water, and was definitely a teenager. The thing was, according to our data, there was no one living there, especially not a human. Fronic was anything but careless, and the facts, as we knew them, were that there was a childless couple living here, happy to have no one but each other. No pets. Nobody in a guest room. The house was supposed to be empty of anything bigger than an insect. "Out! Go, go, go!" Fronic hissed. Him and Hiraleia immediately starting to retreat. I think that the girl's instincts to freeze lasted long enough to combine with our sudden panic and backpedaling. If we'd rushed her, she likely would have tried to run, but her intuition had told her freezing had made her safe, so she just stared at us with wide eyes. I only took 2 slow steps backwards, though, before I stopped, my arms going slack in my sides. "Hey," Hiraleia whispered. "What's wrong with you?" It was a good question, but not quite accurate. There wasn't anything wrong with me. There was something wrong here. Humans mostly lived on another continent, having settled there a few decades back. Anywhere else on Erelank, you barely saw one, because the heat waves that were uncomfortable to Norgillians were unbearable to us humans during the day. Maybe some specialized in a money-earning industry and opened shops. Maybe a politician or a diplomat could be spotted on occasion. And maybe the occasional masochist with something to prove. But not this. I couldn't help myself. "What are you doing here?" My voice was quiet, subdued, and pure confusion. She swallowed hard, still doing her best statue imitation. After a moment she spoke. The police. The alarm," she rasped. Please." "We don't hurt people. No one was supposed to be here, and every rule I have says I need to bail out," I said slowly. The girl's eyebrows twitched. "So?" Zal growled impatiently. "Every rule except one. How old are you? And are you okay?" The teenager flicked her eyes from my partners and then back to me. I'm fine," she whispered. "I'm 20 years old." My eyes narrowed. Bullshit. I examined her body and face more closely. My eyes flicked over my surroundings, and my memory told me she'd come out of a small guest room. "You're older than 16, I'll eat my shoes." "What are you doing?" Hiraleia asked, her voice tight and quiet. "Earliest to find work is 18, I stated. 2 years since then. Latest you could have started with that is if you were actually 14. "What are you talking about?" asked Fronic. Something in his tone had shifted, and while I knew both of them would hightail it if I ran at that moment, he knew there was information he didn't have. It was how his mind worked. In our line of work, lack of information could get people killed. "If you need help, you can tell me," I said. She paused for a moment before I saw something shift in her gaze, a flicker of terror. When she ran, I ran after her. "Wait!" Hiraleia barked. I heard their footsteps hurry after me, down the carpeted hallway as she darted into her room. She tried to swing the door shut, but I went into it shoulder first, and she cried out in surprise, stumbling to the floor. Fumbling backwards, she made it to her feet, backing up until she hit the wall, as I hurried in after her, stopping a few feet away. "Are you out of your mind?" Fronic asked loudly. "What are you doing? What's going on?" "Are you a slave here?" I snapped. At that, I could practically feel both of them behind me stiffen and stop breathing. I just work here," she whimpered, stumbling over the words. "I promise. I'm 20. I started when I was 18. I live here. Please don't do anything. You can leave. I won't say anything to the police about what I saw. I'll say I was asleep. I'll say..." Her voice drifted off, as she seemed to run out of words. My gaze was sliding over the room. Not overly fancy, not overly drab. More than adequate. Clean. Looking her over in the light of the room, though, everything about her was the slightest bit off. Like her nails were trimmed too short, and her hair was acceptable in every way, except I could tell she hadn't had a haircut in ages. What do you see? Fronic asked, his voice hushed. Tears came to the girl's eyes, and her lower lip started trembling. Are you hiding here? I asked. A twitch of confusion in her facial muscles told me that was wrong. What's your name? A long moment passed before she relented. Diane. Diane. You've worked here 2 years. She slowly nodded. We do our research. There's no one else that looks after the house, is there? You're it. And you live in this room. My palms were sweaty at that point, the grip on the bag in my right hand growing damp. Diane, why are you so scared? Shaking her head, she didn't answer, but the pressure of our presence must have gotten to her, because she slowly slid down the wall to the floor, ducking her head, as if trying to disappear. Taking a knee in front of her, something burning in my heart, I let out a long, silent breath. Why are you scared? You broke in. No, try again. Wincing, Diane blinked, and tears finally slid down her cheeks. She wiped them away promptly. I know what happens if someone wants to help me, she whispered, dragging her eyes to mine. Humans don't live here. The only other ones I've ever seen are ones that don't so much as blink when they see me. I'm fine. I'm treated well. I'm healthy. They don't even curse at me if they're angry. You don't get paid. They bought you like a fridge, didn't they? She looked away. Diane, listen to me, I said softly. I'm not demanding you, I'm begging you, please. Tell me how old you are. Staring at the carpet, her expression grew tired, as she wrapped her arms around her legs. Her lips barely moved when she said, 15. You started here when you were 13? Yes. Where did you grow up? On Earth. How did you get here? Diane swallowed. My parents died. I was at an orphanage for a few weeks. Me and all the other girls were selected to go to a new colony on Danu. That's what they said. I was given a data chip with all sorts of information. Some family that already had 2 girls that I'd be living with. But the ship was intercepted. She blinked back some more tears. They killed the crew. It was only 4 of them, and they took us. Hiraleia swore furiously under her breath. My reaction was more severe. The Gibraltar, I rasped, horrified. Diane's eyes flicked to mine, narrowing. The pilot, the captain, the mechanic, and a representative from Earth, all dead. 17 girls missing. It dominated the news for weeks. They're still looking for you. The number for the hotline still goes viral on social media every few months. The girl stared at me warily. Listen, I break into people's houses and steal their stuff. I get how that makes me look. But it just makes me a greedy bitch. I am not the kind of person who would hurt you. Who would hurt anyone. I am not the monsters that took you, or the ones that bought you, or the ones that pretend you're invisible. And I don't know if I can get you to believe that, but I cannot leave you here to rot. I can't. I won't. You have no power, she whispered. You're not rich or important. If you were, you wouldn't be here in the first place. Did you ever consider calling the embassy? I asked. The Earth one? Why would they care? If they knew you were here, they would carve a bloody path through anyone that stood in their way to get to you, I growled. You and any of the other girls. Diane stared at me, as if I was talking gibberish. The same 2 in power who I've seen 3 times at dinner parties? She asked. No, not them. The kind that answer embassy helplines. I know humans have our monsters, I said. But the rest of us destroy them like cancer cells whenever we find them. I paused. Do you have a communicator? For emergencies? I've never used it. Take it out, call the embassy, and ask for help. Diane's eyes held real terror, and I knew why. This was a cushy gig. We had no authority over what other species did outside the law, and some of them had real problems with trafficking. The kind that leave scars. Scars you can see and scars you can't. She was old enough to understand how much worse things could get if the monsters that sold her found out she wasn't willing to stay quiet anymore. She didn't speak. She just stared. so I pulled my mask off. Both of my partners hissed in a sharp breath but didn't move. Diane met my gaze more solidly, taking in the expression on my face. "You call the embassy," I told her softly. "You tell them you've worked as a slave for 2 years. Tell them you were on the Gibraltar. Tell them this address and say you want to go home. And I guarantee you they will be here to take you back to Earth before the sun comes up." Diane's chest heaved in a smothered sob. "I don't have anyone," she whispered. "If I call them, if you're wrong." "I know." I realized my eyes were tearing up too and I blinked quickly. "But you and the other 16 girls, wherever they are, you all deserve to get what you were promised. A home on that new colony. Choices, a life. You are not spending the rest of your life as a slave. I won't let it happen." We waited in silence. The seconds ticked by, and I knew Phonic and Hiralea felt every one of them like a weight on their shoulders. Finally, she spoke up. "The communicator is in my bedside table." I pushed myself to my feet and walked over, finding it and taking it out, turning it on. Doing a search for the number we needed, I found it and went back over to Diane, kneeling in front of her and handing it over. She glanced over it, looking at the URL, I'm guessing. Scrolled down, scrolled back up, took in a deep breath and selected the number. A faint voice answered at the other end and Diana startled. It took her a moment to speak. My name is Diane. I'm human. I was on the Gibraltar, and I want to go home."